And you've been in Cincinnati since 2012, you said?
Yeah. So I did Survivor during, I took a break from my medical training after my first year of residency. Um, Took a bit of time off, and then I went back to, so I did medical school at Emory, and then I was at the Mayo Clinic for the first year of residency, and then I went back to Emory to finish. And I finished up there, and I was looking at different cities. I practice anesthesiology, so it's kind of early in the morning starts, and so I actually would have loved to go to New York, but New York's the city that never sleeps. It doesn't really go so well with having to be up at 5:30 in the morning every day. And I had a college roommate in Cincinnati. We had a good time visiting, and just thought it'd be a good change of pace. And I've been in the South for a while, so kind of wanted to head back a little bit farther north. Enjoyed my time in New England, but wasn't really looking to go back that direction either. And then the West Coast was a bit removed from family and stuff. So I kind of just ended up here, and thought it'd be cool to spend a couple years, near a good friend, and pretty nice middle tier city. I mean, it's actually an awesome quality of life, and cost of living is really very reasonable here. And so that combination was nice. And really just, yeah, I've had some good momentum here. So just been kind of cruising along for a bit. And I spent a bit of time in Chicago these days because I got an MBA there. So last few years has been kind of splitting time between the two cities.
Yeah, that's kind of like a flipping it on its head approach because I know like this a lot of the Survivor people tend to gravitate towards the LA scene if I'm not mistaken, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
like the yeah, that's kind of like the thing. Everybody once their show gets wrapped up, they kind of go to try to soak up those 15 minutes over in LA.
Yeah. I mean, and I think, I definitely toyed with it. I think everybody gets pretty excited. I mean, Gabon was like, kind of in that lull between when Survivor was huge, just in and of itself, and then before social media got kind of really moving up. And so, the idea was like, oh, let's go to LA, like hang out. I spent time there just because, I had a little bit of downtime. And I think, LA is a really cool city. I was just there and have some friends, but, unless you have like really good momentum or you have something else kind of going for you. I think the reality 15 minutes, you know, it, it it comes and goes basically.
Yeah.
So I felt kind of like for me, given that I had to finish medical training and a bunch of other stuff, like I've always kind of kept it in the back of my mind, like yeah, it'd be fun to do some other things, and I've done some other things, but I didn't feel like I needed to be, you know, in the Hollywood scene to try and make that happen.
Right. So
And
acting or any of that stuff wasn't necessarily like in your line of view per se.
it was kind of like you know, that'd be cool, kind of fun stuff. But I had more thought that there was maybe an opportunity to do some healthcare, wellness, teaching, education through media and other avenues. I think at the time, like the Doctors was kind of big, and some of these like shows that were Sanjay Gupta, who's Atlanta based. Those are some interesting role models for me. But part of that's just right time, right place, and I still kind of my opportunity cost for going and running around and seeing if I could make something like that happen was still pretty high because I can finish residency and go practice medicine, and I'm still passionate way to help people. So since that was kind of my goal, I gave it a little bit of time, but I didn't want to pack up the car and just go sleep on somebody's couch in LA for 2 years and see if I could make something happen, and show up to all these Survivor events and kind of feel like cool for a few minutes, which is sort of what Survivor events are like. A lot of fun, but you see the new cast come and go, which is super cool to meet people. But yeah, for the most part, it's like your time's kind of passed, and on to the next thing.
Yeah. What was the becoming a doctor kind of like a childhood dream or aspiration of yours, or did it like kind of fall in your lap spontaneously? How or what maybe prompted you to make the move into that field?
Yeah, I think I was fortunate in that I was pretty good at kind of math and science and English and could kind of go a lot of directions. But my parents weren't physicians or anything, and um, I had a role model, girl I was dating. Her dad was an OB/GYN. He's just super cool guy and could literally fix like anything, people or cars or his own airplane. And it was just this combination of like I was doing archaeology research in Honduras, and we were like hiking around in the jungle, and there were these people like out there. And one time, one of the ladies, like her kid was sick, and the guy carried some Advil with him, and she was like just so grateful for something so simple as like a few Tylenol and some Advil, so to break the kid's fever. And I just kind of saw the impact that that had. And as fun as archaeology was, which is what my major was in college, and doing the Indiana Jones thing, this is a pretty obvious, huge benefit to people. And I think it also kind of coming from my background where the expectation was to be very successful. I think being a physician, at least in the traditional definition, is a mark of success. It's sort of like a minimum standard. At least in my family, my mom's from Cuba. She's pretty traditional lady, so being a doctor and lawyer is a pretty good way to make mom happy. And so yeah, it's like a Venn diagram that overlaps with a lot of stuff. And I did some more research into the profession and just decided it would be a good direction to go. So I had to kind of shift gears a little bit, but yeah, took the MCAT, got into med school, and here I am. Been practicing about 10 years now out of residency.
Wow. Time flies
Yeah.
then.
Dude, it really does.
2012. Now here we're sitting in 2022. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Did that overlap then into your casting process with Survivor? Like, was that a part of? Because I know they'll probably ask you questions about like yourself. Was that at all overlapping with Survivor? Like, because I want to kind of get like your casting story perspective now on like
Yeah,
what led you to trying out, and then like the process itself.
yeah. I mean, for the kind of deeper fans, the casting process, I was sort of one of the recruited people. This is like back in the MySpace days. I got this like super random message. My mom had sent my picture into this like Cosmo bachelor's thing and didn't tell me about it until like they asked me to do this photo shoot for Cosmopolitan, which is hilarious. And this is maybe in like '06 or something. And from that, somebody saw it and like got this message about Survivor on MySpace. And like I'd been watching it, pretty much from the onset, not religiously because I was in med school, but like, my favorite season was when Yule won. And I think Ozzy was second place. That was his first season. And like I kind of love the gameplay, and Yule went to Yale and was like smart dude. Kind of like the outwit thing works really well for him, and I just was fascinated by it. And so when I got that chance to try out, kind of you're not like automatically in. They kind of just let you kind of skip the casting, like showing up to a casting basically. So they like you submit your video, and then next thing I know, they were like, yeah, we'd love for you to fly out to LA, and I was super anxious. And the timing was such that I was just beginning my residency, and so they were pretty complicated because I was like, trying to. I had a couple weeks off before I started residency, and I'm like in LA, and you're stuck in this hotel room and trying to figure out what's happening. It's all very exciting, but at the same time, trying to merge that with, when you go into residency, you're working 100 hours a week and doing call and all this crazy stuff. And what ended up happening was I ended up as an alternate for China, which was when the one Todd Herzog won. And it was super kind of crazy. It's a little disappointing, obviously, because I was pretty excited, but like I saw, in the final casting, there was like 3 or 4 of us, and we're all kind of sitting on the couch. And like, now I'm blanking on the guy, but in China, they do kind of they have to switch a player. Like I think like the 4th or 5th episode, and that guy just like was automatically voted out. And I remember that dude being sitting next to me in the casting finale. And so part of me was like sigh of relief because, I mean, it was like a really crappy draw because it was basically like I think the tribes are down to like 5 or 6 people, and they just got to switch one person. And so whoever lost the immunity the next round, it was like the easiest vote out ever. So this dude got kicked out, and then basically I went through residency, and Lynn Spillman was casting director during that time, and she checked in with me every once in a while. And I was just in the trenches, man. So I was just like working my butt off. And towards the end of that year, I was kind of I had my sister passed away a couple years before that, and so I was just kind of really feeling the strain of residency, and I was sort of hoping for the universe to cut me some slack. And I got this call from Lynn, and she's like, "Hey, we really need kind of somebody like you for this next season. Would any chance you'd be available?" And I was like, "Geez, that would be perfect to get some time off." And so I was like, "Well, I'll fly out to LA and do that final casting process with you again, but I'm not really sure how I'm going to pull this off." And like coincidentally, like the next day, I'm talking to my best buddy in med school, and he was at Emory. And he's like, "Yeah, somebody quit the residency, and so a spot opened up. I mean, you have to take a year off, but you could always come back." And I was like, "This is the craziest thing," because it was like, why would he have even brought that up? And I hadn't said anything about the Survivor stuff because it hadn't worked out the time before, so I wasn't like telling anybody this time around. But it was like the universe kind of opened up this opportunity, and then it opened up this year off to not even miss it, not like miss a beat in a sense, take a year off, but I have a place to go afterwards. And so actually that's what I ended up doing. And then when I flew out to the finale, once you've already done it once, it's a lot easier because you're kind of like, all right, take it or leave it. And and then a few weeks later, I'm on an airplane to Gabon, which is just bananas.
Wow. So that original process then, when it wasn't necessarily you even necessarily seeking out the show, they kind of found you, but you had already had like an inkling of an idea as to what the show was because you were like watching it, but you
Oh
you
yeah,
you yourself never necessarily were making an effort to try out as much as they seeked you out. But then
yeah,
later on is when you got on the show.
yeah. I mean, I've always been a little bit honestly pretty shy, and so I'd much rather be. I think we would all much rather be tapped on the shoulder and be like, "Hey, you're special." So I was never gonna be the one that reached out. Again, maybe I owe my mom a high five for the Cosmo thing because that kind of I guess got me on their radar. But I think that's always been kind of something that's held me back from doing things I would have loved to do. Like I would have loved to try out for Survivor. Honestly, I just guess I didn't have the balls to do it myself, and so it was nice when somebody gave me a little bit of a shove. Um, yeah, even though I would say like it was, relationship wise and stuff, it caused a lot of problems, when you're kind of trying to break direction with some of your, current stuff. But, Survivor's a once in a lifetime experience, as I tell people. And, you know, people sometimes be a weird, like, why did you go on Survivor type of questions? And you're like, dude, are you joking? Like, one of the coolest things out there. Incredible life lessons. Like, yeah, it's a fun TV aspect of it, and you feel shiny for a few weeks. But I mean, it's one of the greatest games ever invented, and there's a very strong meritocracy element to it, even though that's still a TV show. So it's like, you really did have a shot at $1 million while you're out there, and you're excited the whole time, super focused. Like it's a truly special thing to be a part of, and I'm always surprised that people even ask the question because I just can't understand how you wouldn't want to go on Survivor, I guess.
Does the Gabon stuff still come up these days? Like with either if you run into people or maybe say if like they hit you up on social media or
Yeah,
has it died out in recent years?
it definitely died out. I mean, like I said, I think the social media stuff for me was kind of a lull. So it wasn't like, Facebook was kind of getting going, but we were going to have Instagram, like,
Twitter
so
didn't,
a
didn't
lot.
exist yet until the following year, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And so, it was one of those things where, I can have all the blue checks in the world right now, but like, 2008, everybody was like 6 years old or whatever who's on social media. So it wasn't a really big bump in any real shape or form. And so, locally people would come up, but, people are also really shy. So it really takes like kind of a like super fan type of thing. But yeah, every once in a while, like people will be like, "Oh, my mom loves Survivor. Like, can I get a picture?" Funny one, a couple weeks ago, I'm meeting with a guy, and I've been talking to him for a couple weeks, and we sit down for this meeting, and like, there's a there's a survivor whose name is Marcus Lehman, and I was like, you don't say. He's sitting right in front of you, and this dude is like, one of these guys that shuts off his phone Wednesday nights. Everybody knows he's like, that's his like survivor time. And it was fun because like I love the people that love the show too. I enjoy it. Like I get it. I get what they experience when they're watching the show. And I love sharing how I felt about it when I was there. It's always really a nice feeling to share with people. So yeah, it's definitely not as often, but it still happens. And what's funny is that like for most people, I think who kind of really watch Survivor, like you've watched all the seasons multiple times at this point. And so it's crazy because even though Gabon was in 2008, a lot of people, can recollect who was on it. Obviously everyone has their particular favorite season, but it's cool. It's like a language. It's a fraternity. It's a fellowship, and not just for the cast members, but for the people that really enjoy the show a lot.
Yeah, Survivor is just kind of like a really like simple formula that just like stuck and worked. Like there's a lot of reality competition shows and just reality shows in general, but I just think Survivor took like a very like simple formula, but yet so effective in how they deliver it. And I feel like due to that is kind of like what separates them from maybe other shows that try to like maybe put more of like a gimmick over the game
Yeah.
or like the genre rather. But
Yeah, I would agree. And I would build on that by saying that they also picked probably a lot of people's like childhood fantasies, like the Robinson Crusoe, Desert Island, Treasure, Pirate, like how many of these like island type themes, adventure, maybe a little Lord of the Flies sprinkled in there, but this genre, it's the reason Pirates of the Caribbean is such a great movie. Like they picked up on that, and I think that to me was a fundamental part of what made it so cool. In fact, I was kind of bummed because Gabon is got ocean, but we were really kind of like trapped by this crappy kind of lake. It was like beautiful and all this stuff, but it wasn't the tropical island that, and like I love that they've sort of settled on that as a concrete theme in the past, few years and kind of just stuck to Fiji basically and that beautiful island setting.
yeah, you seem to kind of thrive in that environment though. Like usually like that environment's made to kind of like break people. You seemed like one of the ones that was kind of not necessarily faltering due to the environment and was able to kind of cope better than most. Is that
Yeah.
accurate, would you say?
Yeah. I mean, I think that was the adventure part for me. It was like, I read all those books. Like I wanted to go live on a desert island and, figure it all out and suffer. And it was kind of like, oh, how'd you do all that? And it's like, to me, it was like, that's why you're there. The social part was actually hard because I'm a little bit, gruff and, struggle sometimes with like, relational stuff, but the adventure, tree climbing, fishing, running around, like I'm not a woodsman or anything, but it's so cool, it's like, and it's so beautiful. And the natural aspect of it is part of what makes it so interesting. Now, that was kind of more old school Survivor still, where there weren't that many like twists and turns.
Yeah.
So I think it was a little bit less like treasure hunting than it is now. But yeah, that was it was just the ruggedness it's kind of why you're there, I think. So I loved it.
I hear like, and this is kind of just like with reality in general, but like I'm assuming like Survivor probably has like even more of an amplified type of effect with this due to like being in that environment. When you return back to normal life, you have like so much things at your disposal that you don't have like on that island necessarily. So it
Yeah.
is definitely a bit of a culture shock, but also a culture shock because you come back from having like so many cameras in your face at all times and like all your like movements are kind of documented to then normal life when maybe in some cases it's a lot more lonely than what it was back during filming of the show. So there
Yeah.
is a culture shock element to there. Did you experience any of that, or was your return to normal life not as daunting as maybe some others?
Yeah, I mean, I would strongly say yes. I think the the couple things that I remember in particular was like the transition to having food again was just so it was weird. Like the first couple of weeks when I was in kind of sticking around to the jury, I'd like have like a plate of food next to my bedside because I was like worried about kind of waking up and not having food again. And so there's these like weird survival transitions, um, and even like I felt like I gained a ton of weight, which I did, but I wasn't like overweight. It was just my body kind of like recovering from starvation mode. But that had like a psychological impact. It wasn't just like, okay, I'm back to normal weight. It was like, oh man, like I'm fat. And
Yeah.
so there was some like difficult transitions on just the basic functioning stuff. And then, yeah, I got home. I was in Jacksonville, Florida. I remember just kind of like sitting at my desk in my like crappy like med school house with like 15 roommates and like being like, God, this really sucks compared to having Jeff Probst showing up and telling me about it. Then my next challenge, and and at that time, I hadn't won, and I was really bummed out about kind of some of the manipulation stuff that I feel like contributed to me getting voted out. And just in spite of my hard efforts, which I know everybody feels great except the winners. Um, and yeah, like actually, what saved me was Corinne calls me up and she's like, "Hey, can you come to LA?" I was like, how come? And I guess she was friends with like Nick Lachey and Vanessa Manillo, and they were like going down to Cabo and gonna like hang out for a few days. And she's like, if you can get to LA tomorrow, like, we're going down here, it's gonna be great. And I went, I like literally like didn't even unpack like the bag I'd packed and was like booked the flight and I just went and like, you know, got to hang out with my survivor friends again. I spent like 2 weeks out there just like soaking it back up. And it was great because, I think if anything, you know, part of the reason I think people gravitate towards LA, and this is where it is great, is that you get to kind of slowly emerge from that survivor experience instead of being just thrown right back into your kind of doldrum regular life. And that's just a real deal thing. Like people like feeling special, that you do feel very special for a bunch of weeks, and it takes a little time to kind of get back to normal.
Yeah, I've been saying there should be like some type of transitional period, like a little bit of a bubble period, between leaving the filming of the show and returning into normal life. Somewhere in between, like when you don't necessarily return to like your normal thing right away, but you return to kind of like a less heightened show environment that's still kind of like a normal bubble. Do you think that'd be like a pretty decent thing to implement with reality shows?
Yeah, and I mean they kind of do that. I mean they definitely provide they provide like counseling and other things because they're definitely aware of it. I think everybody has to go through their process. It might be cool to do something where it's like, hey, these are the kind of common experiences people have when they finally like get home or get back to their normal careers and stuff. So, if you're having some of these feelings like it's normal, or creating like a kind of big brother, big sister system where it's like you can talk to some other previous fans or sorry, people that have been through it and can provide some of that other support. Because yeah, it's like not that we're Olympic athletes or anything, but anybody who's kind of reached a really kind of unique experience in life needs a little bit of reacclimation to normalcy again. And I think everybody suffers from that, even if it's not Survivor, if it's some big award or doing well in a sporting event. Like, yeah, it takes a minute to adjust, and it's nice to know that you're not the only person struggling through something. It doesn't take away from what special and awesome thing you did. And there's nothing actually wrong with your normal life. Like I have a wonderful life. I'm healthy and have a tough job and all that stuff. But it takes time. Yeah, it's definitely a unique thing.
hmm And your season saw you kind of take on a leadership role. You started the Onion Alliance, and you guys were going pretty strong. You actually hold this. You actually hold a few records actually within Survivor. I don't know if you knew this. I think you're one of cast members that like were not up for the chopping block for
Yeah,
like X amount of eliminations or
right.
tribal councils before actually being eliminated. Which made your elimination even more kind of like sudden because like it seemed like nobody saw it coming. What would you say like your biggest takeaway from your elimination was? Like what maybe was the catalyst for leaving? Because the edit kind of made it seem like it was Crystal swaying Susie in a sense to flip is kind of where the edit kind of was taking that one.
Yeah,
Where do you feel like the catalyst really was? Was that it, or you think there's something else?
I mean, I certainly was aware of some of the records or whatever, and I think the catalyst was a little more like I think basic, and that when they mixed us up, it basically flipped to a mini tribe with three of them and two of us, and so you know it was a pretty easy shoe in. I don't know that there was anything I could have done. I had this external connection to Crystal through a good friend of mine at home, actually. Um, and Susie had been sort of on the outs in our group, but basically it's very easy human nature, and I think we've all seen it in real life, but um, you kind of whoever your original sides are most of the time, that's who you stick to. And if you see a really easy opportunity, like they went back to their sort of original tribe voting section, um, that's pretty simple. And I think that's part of it's a good life lesson because that's part of what happens sometimes in real life when somebody who's on the outs for a while suddenly gets an opportunity to stick it to somebody else. Like that's exactly what's going to happen. So you have to be kind of mindful of those types of things. I don't know that we could have played it any different, not knowing that we were going to not merge, basically. But that to me was sort of where things went down. I mean, I think back to like, could I have signaled to Charlie and Corinne like that I was not okay, and I probably could have and didn't, kind of try to be the leader and tell them that everything was fine, and it probably wasn't. So some of those things where you get these little inklings, and I think the other piece is like in real life, like if you're doing well at something, then you have to be mindful that somebody does not enjoy you doing well when they're not, and that's always a real thing. And Survivor's an unbelievable place to learn those lessons, and in my case, sometimes the hard way, right?
Yeah, there was like a conspiracy theory like amongst like fans that like they threw in that second tribal switch up to kind of take down the Onion Alliance. Do you think like there's any merit to that?
I think in retrospect, I had some confirmation that was kind of the case. I mean, that's part. But again, that's part of like understanding it's a TV show, right? And
Right.
those are the things that when I was there and I'm filming it and all these things, like here I am, spouting all my strategy to the producers, and here's what I think about this and this and that person, and you understand that like they're still trying to make a really good TV show, and I think me winning $1 is a wonderful TV show, but like that's not the opinion of Probst and all these guys. Like they wanted to kind of stir some up, and I think we were just very kind of rational. We were voting out the powerful people. We got rid of Ace and kind of did things in a very like structured way, which in their opinion is not the TV show they wanted. And I think that plays into some of the subtle twists and turns that Survivor can have. How hard is it to find that immunity idol? And frankly, like that's people could be like, oh, well, that's manipulation or cheating or something. And I think I felt that way for a little while because it was against me. But the reality is like that's how life works. Actually, you're in a business and you want to get a position of leadership, and then somebody else gets it for some other reason, and it's subtle, but like that's how the game's played. And I think I'm a lot more mindful of it because of Survivor, which I think is just again one of the coolest things about this show is we did this awesome game, and it just has so much applicability in real life if people will like kind of pay attention to that. And frankly, if I played again, I think just like when I watched Corinne play again, you kind of make all the same mistakes again. Like it's very hard. It's a human nature, fundamental type of thing. Like I'm not going to go in there playing again and like not try and win all of the challenges, and I'm not going to try and like steer things a different direction. But the one thing I think I would do differently is, and everybody does this every season, is kind of be like, oh, whatever, this person is not really a threat. Let's just leave them around and keep them around. It's like I'd rather end up with, you know, the five strongest people at challenges, because it seems like every time you kind of let the weaker link kind of linger, that is what ends up flipping back on whatever alliance is kind of successful. Like
Mhm.
you leave that one person hanging out because you feel like you can vote them out anytime, and the reality is like you can't. That's a kind of a superpower that person has, and if you're not careful, then they stumble into an idol, or like I said, the numbers get close enough to where they're able to flip the script on you.
It kind of seemed like that's kind of how Gabon ended too, like with the final. Like Bob ended up winning, obviously. It was a deserved win, but it seemed like he was almost a shoo-in to win based on like who was there with him in the end. You know what I mean?
Well, and Gabon, I think, was very stark in that I think there was two very big, two groups. There was a very big gap between the two, right? So I think, Randy was an incredibly bright guy. Corinne, same thing. Charlie was brilliant. And Bob was a really neat guy too. And it was a really strong core group. When you think about maybe like the final 10, and, I consider myself kind of aligned with those guys. And then everybody else was sort of ho hum. And so, whoever of our group was still there at the end, we kind of thought it would be really cool if you had that as the final five, like me, Charlie, Corinne, Randy, and Bob. It's like, geez, like who's going to win that, right? Because everybody's got strong reasons to be there. Anybody could have won any of those challenges, and that to me is like the nose to nose end of the race photo finish survivor that I get excited about. That's kind of why I loved Ozzy and Yule, because it was like, dude, these guys are like so good at their respective things. Like, who should win this? And Peterson was awesome too. And like you have these like great photo finishes. But I think, when it comes to a TV show, you need to be exciting kind of all the way through. And so that was like a different element. But, I think by flipping it in the middle, by the end, it was like everybody's pretty ho hum compared to who was left, frankly. So I think it made the end pretty legit, boring to me. But, that's maybe not the most objective opinion.
Yeah. It was kind of interesting dynamic of people in that Onion Alliance. You kind of have like Bob, who's a little bit of a diplomatic type person, and then you've got like you, who's like the leader there, right? And then Randy and like Corinne are kind of referred to as like villains within like the challenge realm. Uh, you kind of gravitated towards them though. Like, do you feel like there's a little bit of a misunderstanding there amongst like the perception of like who like their character arcs are, maybe?
Yeah, I think there's always a dichotomy between some of the character arcs and some of the characters, and that part of that is just how little time there is to really flesh everyone out. Um, there are people that have like facades, which I think was kind of the way I would describe Corinne, where it's like she kind of likes being mean, but she's really not that mean. And there's other guys like Randy or like Grumpy. It's like I really enjoy finding what's underneath people, and I think a lot of like really good, pure human beings in certain ways. And then there's also people that lean into their characters. Like I think Corinne loved leaning into her being kind of the Cruella of the season, and yeah, she kind of I think she understood TV for what it was a little better than I did. So that's kind of, but at the same time, like, she's there for her friends. She's like a super loyal person. We had a lot of great conversations that showed me that she's definitely not kind of the mean truly mean human. She's sort of like the mean girl version.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of how we all ended up smushed together.
So do you think, well, firstly, did you get any opportunities to return again? Like, were they giving you phone calls and leaving the door open, and you just, decided to go in a separate path?
I wish I could say that. I don't think I would have turned it down. Yeah, I think yeah, I remember it's funny when my first interview I said to Lynn that Yul Kwan was my favorite survivor, and she's like, "Oh, he's so boring," and I was like, "Well, I didn't think he was boring." So me patterning myself off of that guy that she's not like as a kind of casting choice, I think sort of as I reflected back, like probably wasn't going to get invited back just because it was maybe a little bit too much in the same vein. And I think as I've seen characters since then, like that's Survivor's got a lot more crazy, off the edge kind of characters mixed in, and a lot less of the sort of calm, cool, collected kind of rational side. So I'm probably not a great fit for the new version of Survivor anyway. But yeah, I didn't get any check your email kind of opportunities since then.
Well, Survivor still wasn't the last reality show that you did, because you actually did go on to do Labor of Love was another one you did.
Yeah.
What,
Yeah. So that,
what were you noticed from Survivor, or was that something that you actually actively auditioned for?
yeah, I mean, that was another kind of funny situation. I was on a dating app in Chicago and, connected with somebody, and they're like, well, actually, um, I guess you're not really supposed to do this on dating apps, but like we're casting for this show, and you'd be a great fit. And I think it was interesting because at the time I was sort of really thinking deeply about relationships and partnership and family and kind of what I want to do. And the show was couched to me as like, kind of an opportunity to spend a bunch of time with other guys that were thinking similarly, and knowing how much I got out of Survivor, and I actually had the time, just coincidentally, because I'd finished an MBA and was taking a little short sabbatical from work. It just worked out. It was just a cool opportunity. The show was, pretty interesting, a little different, definitely not Survivor, but I would say the only thing that was connected was the fact that like I felt very confident through the process of, what I was willing and interested to do. And, the interviews and all those pieces were, pretty straightforward because I'd kind of done it before. And for me, it was a little bit more take it or leave it, because it's like, it's not the TV element that I'm here for. It's the like deep communion with the other castmates. And to be fair, I really got that. Like, I met some amazing guys. I thought the main character, she was a pretty cool person, and had a great time. And that's kind of a lot of what reality is about, a lot less about the winning and losing part. And as far as like the premise of, meeting somebody special and starting a family, like that seems totally reasonable to me. If you can meet somebody on a dating app, like, or a bar when you're a few drinks in, like, somebody's been curated for TV shows, had a little bit of vesting process, so that was okay with me. And like I said, if it hadn't been, I could have kind of left at any time. So it was just a great additional experience for me. And the romance genre was cool because I hadn't kind of done that before, and wasn't really keen on the bachelorette type stuff. So yeah, kind of checked another box, and had a great time.
Yeah, just chalk it up to another life experience.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it was, sometimes I don't kick opportunities out of bed. Like I'm always asking, how can I do something? And I think it's a great mindset. And sure, I could look back and be like, oh well, it was a waste of time because you didn't win, or a lot of people seem kind of critical of like putting your love life on TV. But again, I think it's a misunderstanding with getting to be on these shows. It's just you really get to think and experience things really deeply. I mean, you spend hours being asked what you're thinking and how you're feeling, and then you spend a bunch of hours doing nothing. So you're like writing in journals, and it's pretty hard in the kind of life I have to have that kind of time broken out for you. I highly encourage anybody, if they can do it without a reality TV show, like that kind of self exploration and doing it with like minded people is incredibly valuable. It's a super cool thing, super cool side effect of being fortunate enough to have done this a couple times.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Marcus, for giving me your time today. I had a great time
Yeah,
speaking with you, and I wish you the best of luck with everything you've got going on.
love it. Next time we'll do it in New York with some pizza.
Sounds good to me. All
All
right.
right.
Take
Awesome, Mike.
care.
Talk to you later. Thanks, brother. Bye.